No, hi everyone.
We're live.
Indeed.
Hi everyone. We're just going to give it a few minutes for everyone to get online, probably just one more. So I'm based in Brisbane today and it is muggy.
Yeah, I wish
you guys.
We've got the rain happening in Sydney at the moment. But hey, Hardik, how you feeling? You're all warm? You're all ready?
Yes, I'm all ready.
6 a.m. in the morning over there, isn't it?
Yes, 6 a.m. in the morning.
Oof. Oof. Nothing like an early morning start to get you going, right?
Right?
No, I'm all morning person. I love it.
Oh,
Likewise.
me too, actually. Well, in Brisbane, I am.
This is true. Depends on your time zone.
Depends which country I'm in and what time zone and how bright it is outside for me. Right. Oh, and I know that we've got a few people in here now, and the coordinator in the background has let me know that we've got people flooding in, so that is fantastic. So we'll kick off. Welcome everybody to the Ideation to Creation webinar. I'm Rachel Hedges. I'm from RMH Consulting. We are an international marketing agency. I'm the founder and we work with the companies all over, particularly APAC. And I'm really excited to be hosting you all today. So we're going to talk about taking a technology product from ideation to creation. We know that it can be a very overwhelming prospect, but it's not if you have the right team and the right advice. So if you need help creating a framework, a prototype, or business goals for your new technology product, then you're in the right place for today. We are here to help you not only make an impact with your product, but also to start generating income from your idea. So strap in as we take you from vision to strategy to build. And I'm going to hand over to our esteemed panelists to start the introductions. Kristof, over to you.
Thanks very much, Rachel. Hi, everybody. Kristof here from ASC. We're a specialist technology solutions provider. As with Rachel, we're a global provider, but we also focus on Australia. I'm followed by my esteemed candidates and co-hosts in the conversation, Darren.
Thanks, Kristof. Thanks, Rachel. Darren Bartsch. I'm from Barrana. We're a custom software or bespoke custom development company. We do anything from apps, web applications, utilize the blockchain technologies, pretty much international as well, clients across Australia, Singapore, Canada, USA, and Asia. Over to you, Hardik.
Hey, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. I am Hardik, and I work as a senior architect with Aapna Infotech. I have more than 20 years of experience in delivering technology products and robust and scalable solutions. I help startups and SaaS products with technical leadership. Thank you. Over to you, Rachel.
Well, I'm super excited to kick this off. So let's start with vision as we've got planned. Darren, why do you need a vision when starting a project?
A number of reasons. I'm going to break it down into three for you. I think to start with, if you don't know where you're going, you're probably going to end up somewhere else. So knowing where you're going is really important. So I'm going to break it down into three things: mission and story. I'm going to then talk about research and use case, and then I'm going to talk about goals.
Great.
And feel free to jump in as well, guys, as we talk about this. I think if you're going to start a project, you need to work out what product you're going to develop to start with. Because if you don't know what you're developing, or if you don't have your idea and you don't have it mapped out, it's going to cost you very much in time and money. So looking at that, if it's not a new product, what software are you going to develop that's going to solve a need or solve a gap in the market? So you need to look at your reasons for doing that. And I think with any software or any product, you need to be able to develop a community around that. And so it's looking at the community and what's missing in a community and how you can solve that with a product that you can develop. And from a marketing perspective, which you're really aware of, Rachel, if you don't have a powerful story, with your product, then you're just like everyone else out there in the marketplace. Because as we all know, stories sell. And if you don't have a good story to go with your product, you're just another company out there in cyberspace.
Yeah.
So I think let's look at the second phase, which is sort of research and use case. Because just because you have a great idea doesn't necessarily mean that you need to bring it to market, because there may be other ideas that are already out there that are already filling the space. And if you can't do it better, then you're just like everybody else out there. So looking at your product that you want to develop, it's like, is it a variation from a current product? Can you do it better? Does the market need it? And how are you going to do it differently? So it's really going out into the market space, doing some research and seeing if there is a need out there and then having a use case for it. So they're the first two. And then the third point is having your goals for it. Because if you're going to start a new product, so let's look at it from a couple of perspectives. If you have a goal for a product, you've created, say, a product that you want to use for your own company, first with, you're going to look at your goals for that are going to be completely different than if you're going to build a business around it and then, say, sell it to somebody else. So your goals are really important. So how are you going to build a business? Are you going to build a company around it? You're just going to use it in your own? Or like I said, you know, are you going to look at it for the long-term perspective of building it up and then selling it down the track? And you look at everything completely different. So they're my first 3 points that I would talk about around vision. Kristof, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, look, I just want to thank you very much, Daz. One of the key factors I've always found about the internet is like putting up a billboard in the middle of the desert, right? You can have the most amazing signage, you can have the most amazing information on it, but unless you're driving people to it through something like marketing, which is what Rachel will speak about, it's kind of a pointless effort, right? And as you said, if you've got the right community to talk about where to go, I mean, like Route 66 as an example, middle of nowhere in American desert, but if you can direct someone to it, by all means, you get the traffic, and that's where we're sort of helping around that by creating that medium in that market, right?
Yeah. I guess it's adding purpose, isn't it? Having that with your vision, you get some purpose out of it. And I think that's a really important reason, because if you've got no purpose, what's the point of doing the product? Absolutely. What do you think, Hardik?
You need to have purpose. You also have to think about cost and the perspective, and you also want to make money out of it. So when you start with your product, so what Darren is saying, like, let me explain. So we have to start with the user experience design, right? So user experience design is, it's about solving a problem. So you have a problem, you want to solve it. It is not about being creative, and user experience design should be useful where the content should be original. It should fulfill a need. Your product must be easy to use. Your product should be desirable, where design elements or you should bring out about emotions and appreciations. Your content needs to be locatable, and your content should be accessible to all, including the differently able people. And your content should be credible. So user must believe and trust what you are telling them, what stories you are telling them. So let me explain. So let me explain how do you create the great user experience. It is actually a 5-step process. It starts with the product definition, where you have a stakeholder interviews to gather insights about your business goals. And then you have value proposition mapping to map the business goals with the user experience, and concept sketching, which is actually creating an early mock-ups of your future product. This can be a low fidelity paper sketches. The second step is to product research, which includes individual in-depth interviews and detailed competitive research. And then moving on to the third step, which is analyze the data gathered in the previous 2 steps, and where we create a user personas, which reference them as a realistic representation of your target audience. And then we create a user stories, and user stories will map different paths which user can take within his or her experience. And we create a storyboards, which helps to connect user personas and user stories. And the next step, number 4, is design, where we sketch to visualize your ideas. Then we create wireframes, which helps to visualize the basic structure of a future product. And then we need to create a prototype, which is an actual interaction experience. And it is like a simulation of your product. It can be a clickable wireframes or a recorded prototypes also. And the last step is to validate and perform testing with people who represent your target audience. There are different formats like moderated or unmoderated testing, usability testing, focus groups testing, beta testing, A/B testing. You need to perform all this and gather the feedbacks. And also, as Darren and Kristof mentioned, that we need to do a lot of research. So let me explain why user experience design is very important. A good user experience will create a user-focused design, which will make your product stand out in the market. It will create better customer satisfaction to conversion to retention journey. And it will also establish a two-way relationship with your product and between the product and the users. And finally, it would result in improved return of investment for you. So it will create an intuitive experience and enhance credibility. So this is where your user experience design is very important. And I would not stress less to engage with experience and experts in this domain.
Yeah.
Over to you, Rachel.
Agree. And you just don't know what you don't know, right? And so you might think, oh, I'm all over this. I can look after user experience. And then when it comes down to it and you've actually executed on your product and you realize that your UX is wrong, you're in a ton of trouble.
I liken it to a footpath in the council area, right? Where you've got a line where the footpath is on one side, but then the user experience would be people walking through the middle on the grassy patch because it was an easier experience, right?
Yeah. So a huge percentage of businesses fail in the first 5 years. So there's this common saying, right? Failing to plan is planning to fail. You wouldn't believe how hard that is to say, but it's also so easy to forget. And I think that what we've just talked about is why it is so important to plan. So Kristof, how do we create visibility across multiple cloud channels and why is it important?
Thanks, Rachel. I'm going to quickly liken the conversation to what you were saying before, Darren, right? So the concept around if you have a vision and that's mixed with the strategy, you get a purpose for your project. And I steal that out of your words previously. And to answer your question, Rachel, one of the things that we quite often forget about in conceptualizing what we're looking to design and develop is the fact that the vision needs to have a post step, right? And so that means that you've got to have visibility. And in this case, we've talked about how you've got the concepts and the initiation of the projects, but then once you've got that to a startup stage, you're going to have visibility across multiple teams, across multiple areas. You're talking about people like sales, you're talking about marketing, you're talking about application development. And of course, you being the entrepreneur that you want to be able to see this, right? And so by creating what's known as a development operations platform or having that implemented at the beginning and the onset, that creates a seamless engagement for both yourself and the teams that are involved along the way. And so that gives that freedom for you to see what's going on, but it also means that you can put certain pieces into the puzzle along the way without having to feel like that, as you were saying before, right? You have to change your UX dramatically, but by setting that up correctly from the start, the UX changes can be done in a moderate fashion, but it can also be in an integrated fashion. So that freedom is certainly something that most people want to have in that application platform. And the reason being, as part of that, is you may also change your strategy, right, along the way. And I think, Darren, you've spoken to this, right? Strategy is key from the start, but it can change, right? And
Absolutely.
You may well have looked at something that was a great use case in the onset, and along the way, feedback has created a completely different use case, right? And then you go, right, well, let me create some of that value in adapting my idea or my platform or my application. And so we have that capability by creating open visibility through a DevOps typing engagement so that you have flexibility to be able to move and choose. One example could be that you started with something in your back office. You know, someone had a spare piece of infrastructure around and you've gone and grown and you've scaled along the way. But now that that's sort of got a bit redundant because you need more scale and more capability, you might move to something like a private cloud or a public cloud provider, right? And at that point, you want that visibility to be able to move and integrate and take advantage, especially ultimately of that and scale out from that. How do you feel about that, Daz?
Hey, just before I go to that, I just want you to, for the audience, just to talk about DevOps, because some people on the call mightn't understand DevOps. So do you want to just explain that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks, Darren. Appreciate that, man. And DevOps or development operations is kind of that, let's call it the sanity and the post implementation phase of an application. When you think about a development lifecycle, that's kind of key to where DevOps sits in. So you've got the ability for implementing what's called a framework or a development operations framework to be able to make sure that you've got stages of implementations along the way. And that's where that framework starts to come in. And that's crucial. We find that that's the crucial part of implementing visibility and change along an application lifecycle.
Very good. And just going back to your question there that you asked, I think if you've got an idea right from the beginning and you're building it around a community, the community will give you that feedback that you need to change as you go along. You might have the greatest idea in the world, but no one wants it. No one needs it. You might think you need it, but you know the community doesn't need it. So I guess the fastest way is to be able to get some feedback as quickly as you can. And what we're trying to do in putting together the vision and strategy is to try and get that feedback as fast as you can from your community so that you can implement, so that your community has some involvement in putting your product out there. That's how I would put that. Yeah.
There's a lot to be said with buy-in from the beginning, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
And as we look at a number of products and services that are coming to the market at the moment, it's all about agility. So they're changing as the market is changing, as the customer demands change. So it's the same with this. While we're planning and we're doing our strategy, we're also needing to be agile to move to the market, which may not have been necessarily where our thinking was in the beginning when we were having the ideation of our product or technology.
Well, look at the last 18 months, 24 months even.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And as entrepreneurs, we do tend to be quite spontaneous. We're driven by the fun and the spontaneity of business and ideas. So when I work with clients in marketing, I always say that there's no point in marketing without strategy. Your marketing needs to align to your business strategy. Otherwise, you're just posting pretty pictures and seeing if people like it, but you're very unlikely to get conversion off the back of that. So strategy is key. So with that, I think we move into the strategy phase of this and kick off with you, Darren. Yep. How does one prepare a detailed strategy that saves money and time?
I think there's a couple of things you need to look at, Rachel, from the strategy perspective. One is people, two is planning, and three is prototype. And I'll talk to all three of those. So I think the first part, you know, if you've got a vision and you've got through that first section and you're moving into your strategy is who's on your team. Because it doesn't matter what project you do, doesn't matter what business there is there, you need a team. And the team on a project like this might be a coach to guide you because you have no idea how to put something like this together. And that's, you know, getting the right people, and that could be your sales, your marketing, your branding to start with. It could be your legal requirements. And I'll explain there, because you might have a great idea and it's some particular IP and you haven't got that secured. So you've started to put it out to market, someone else steals it. So you getting your legal advice, getting your accountants involved, getting the corporate structures and that involved for your idea. Getting your team, talking about infrastructure from your, like you were just talking about with your DevOps and your planning for your hosting, and that Hardik's talked a little bit about that as well. So getting the people side of it, I think, is really important up front, and who's going to be on your team. The next part, I believe, is your planning, and anyone that's been in business has put together a business plan of some kind. And if you need to raise funds for your plan or for your project, this is really important that you get that together here. So business plan, marketing plan, financial plan, getting all those basics. I'm not going to go through that in detail here, but anyone who's been in business or put together a business idea has usually put those three things into account. And then Hardik was talking a little bit about user experience. And I think if you're going to put an idea out there to market, you need to raise capital of some kind. You're going to need to have some sort of prototype user design, something that you can take to market and people can experience it, especially the investors. So I'd be looking at the prototype as being a really important thing, demonstrating your product or your software so people can see what your idea or concept is, and then they give you feedback. We're talking about being agile. You get your feedback through your prototype, and then you can change it and update it as you need to. And then if you're going to market to raise funds, you need a pitch deck. So you need to get your marketing team together, get a video, get all those sort of things together. Having a fully costed plan is really important at this stage. And your brand intent, which is where your marketing and your team starts to come in. So you were talking a little bit about user experience, Hardik, and user design. I think this is where all that comes in. And this is before you even get to the build. You should have all of this considered before you even get to building a product, because then you can start to get some feedback from the market and see whether or not the idea is worth taking it to the next step and building it. And you try to get to this stage as fast as you can, as cheaply as you can, to get your idea, to see if your idea is worth moving forward with. Your thoughts, Hardik?
Yeah. So obviously you need to validate your idea, and to validate your idea is first step is to create a proof of concept. or which is called a minimum viable product if you are building a product, which is commonly known as MVP. And why should you build an MVP or a minimum viable product? There is a reason for it. So MVP is a faster and lower risk approach, and it allows you to launch the product without investing a lot of time and money, and it helps to get a quick customer feedback. And it also, as Kristof mentioned before, that it allows you to fail fast. If a customer doesn't like your idea, you can find out before investing a lot of time and energy into it. Yeah. So absolutely. And then what MVP should contain? So MVP should be very basic, launchable version of the product, which has minimal yet must have features which define your value proposition, which you already identified in your business strategy. You should enable, it should enable you faster time to market, and it balances between business offerings and your user needs. So there are a few questions come up, like what features should be part of the MVP, right? So MVP should build with login and authentication so that user can register and use the product without difficulty. It should include your basic content and which helps user navigate the application and understand its features. It should collect some data about users, which can be as limited as collect users' interactions and selection of within the app. And data gathering can also involve collecting user feedback. You should always have an option to collect the user feedback. And it also should have interactive features so that users can get actual engagement with its key functionalities. And the most important part is the revenue generation or monetization features in your MVP, which allows you to generate revenue from your product and analyze the product ideation in the market. Right. So it is a very good idea to look at MVP strictly from a cost perspective, right? When you are throwing out an idea. So Darren and Kristof already mentioned that we are here to make money, but we also want to make sure that we are showing a cost perspective, and that features which are not key differentiator in your product should be avoided in MVP. Right. And so there is there any guidelines for features to be avoided from MVP? So there are a few of them. I can say that nice to have features which are desirable for your product, but they are strictly not necessary for its functioning. Complex integrations like marketing tools, analytics, or complex third-party APIs that should be avoided in MVP. The artificial intelligence or machine learning, we are very popular within the app, but they can be very expensive and time consuming. So it should be kept best for the later stages. And also augmented reality and virtual reality, AR, VR, which can boost user engagement and are very attractive to have in your product, but they are also very costly to include in an MVP. So we can have some sort of an experience, but not fully featured product, AR, VR experience. So this is where we are. Back to you, Rachel.
So Kristof, we've touched on DevOps briefly in that you've explained essentially what it is and where it kind of fits in. But can you tell me, how do you extend the platform or the product or the application to give visibility across the life cycle? And also, why is it important?
Yeah, great question, Rachel. Thank you. One of the key factors around a vision when it's coupled with a strategy in your build is that you can get growth on your project, right? And so we've heard from Darren around building that strategy, which is key and vital, engaging with partners like yourself in marketing. And I must stress, whilst this seems like an arduous task, it's actually not. If you've got the framework up front, it's quite easy to go through an almost checkbox engagement with the right people. And that way you've got that sort of ease of engagement, and we can work you through those processes. And back to your question there, Rachel. So why would you want to do that, right? So you've got to your MVP with Hardik's team, and you've got, you've invested, you've got your angel investors are looking at this now, right? You've got seed funding that's going out, you've done your deck, you've got that in front of people, and you're starting to look at now growth. This is the most key factor that we get to. And part of that is getting to that ROI stage as fast as you can. As an entrepreneur, you have, your focus is on two things, freedom and connections. So freedom is being able to actually make an impact by your application, your platform, etc., and be able to engage with people, right? And so doing, you create revenue and income, and that creates a connection. And that's with a broader audience, it could be with whoever, but it also gives you the opportunity to turn that impact into something that's actually possibly a social impact as well as an economic impact, okay? Now, we've got past that MVP, but then you've got to start looking at the next step, which is growth and scale. So as we were discussing before between yourselves, that we've got that MVP built and it's on an infrastructure. It could be, like I said, in a server that's sitting in the background right now, but we've got people starting to hit it. Now, you're going to start looking at your cost and your revenue ROI. So we need to start to stretch out. And by doing that, one of the best features of the internet is that we created what we call public cloud. And that's been around for quite some time. Now, the cloud's nothing more than somebody else's infrastructure in a data center somewhere, okay? So that term was wonderfully marketed, but it is also key because you need to be able to start looking at what your application needs are and be able to use multi-platform, multi-cloud opportunities. And by doing that, by creating it in what we would call a microservice type engagement, a type of platform, and using the DevOps platform means that along the way, you can actually capture your application and migrate it, move it, or scale it and increase it to different platforms, different locations. And that means you've got flexibility. So you may find, for example, that you're using, and I'll use this as a term, a spot instance on one platform, which is something that's quite discounted, but that has therefore shut down and you need to scale that up on another location. By having that in your pipeline and being able to develop and move your application around, your growth and scale isn't hamstrung, firstly. And secondly, it's a more of a discounted or a cost efficiency for you by having that set from the get-go in that strategy stage. And then when you've gone past this, and we will start to talk more about this in the build stage, you can actually look at real cost benefits and real returns.
So strategy is really cheap insurance, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
I'll speak to one point, and this is a statistic that it's come to me. 4% of businesses have a strategy in place. Only 4%.
That's unreal.
Funnily enough, and then that statistic then extends. So a large majority of businesses fail in the first year. In actual fact, it's over 50%. And you start talking about 5 years, it goes down even further. But when you get to 10 years, take a wild guess of how many percentage of businesses have survived. Bingo. And you know why? Because they have a strategy and they plan. So by doing that, and this is by engaging with someone and a team, I should say collectively, we will be able to give you that plan, that strategy, and that means you can then definitely make that impact, right?
So it's talking about that holistic view as well, isn't it? We're looking at everything to ensure we're ticking all the boxes so that when we go to market, we're good to roll. There's no error left behind. And I think that's why it's so important to have the right team involved. And it goes back to what I said before, and that you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And it becomes much more obvious as you make mistakes.
Learn from ours.
But that's when you start to realize, because you thought you knew and you didn't know. So right, so let's move on to build. Hardik, what is the role of architecture in a product, and what are the important notes and pitfalls to do with that?
Sure. Thanks. So the first step is to engage with an enterprise architect. Enterprise architect should operate strategically and work with executives to achieve your product goals and align your technology and the business strategy. Architect will guide your business and take decisions about information, process, technology, and execute a business strategy or the roadmap, and it will also identify software and hardware needs. And enterprise architect will actually propose an architecture which will consist of, actually Kristof already covered few of them. So it should consist of the infrastructure strategy, whether you want to have your product on premises or on cloud, core product architecture, security strategy, and scaling strategy, and how the users will increase and growth expected, whether you will return to that scaling part or not, scale up, scale down, orchestration and transaction management strategy, and then deployment and DevOps strategy. So Kristof has already mentioned a couple of times before DevOps. So those strategies are quite important and in your growth of the product. Now, if you need to engage with an industry expert to achieve the goals, it is very important to engage with your industry experts to achieve the goals. And what happens if you do not engage with the enterprise architect or a solution architect, as a matter of fact, it can lose the scope of the project, and which can be very cost consuming and resource consuming without achieving your end goal. So enterprise architect or a solution architect which actually keep a tab and create all the strategies which will work, which will create a culture within an organization. So if it is not there, then it will have a cultural clash within organization and multiple teams work without having the end goal in the sight. So that is how enterprise architect will be a very crucial in your product journey. in the building product.
Fantastic. So let's move on to actually building the project as well, right? So Darren, tell me, what are the important points to consider when you're building the project?
I think Hardik's sort of started on the process with all the systems architecture, but I think that all comes from at the stage that Hardik was talking about, is having your master or your software development plan, so that you have all of those things taken care of. And that includes even the tech stack that you're going to work in, and whether or not that the tech stack or the type of software you're going to build it in, whether it's there for scale, and so you take all of that into account. But then I think it's really taking everything that you've done in the strategy stage, and then being able to, with your plans, and then being able to build your MVP and getting all of that in place so that you can go out to market and start to test it. So some of the things around there is certainly support and maintenance once you've done that, because you put it out to the marketplace and you need to go, right, so these are the stages that you're getting feedback. You've had feedback from your prototype. Now you're getting feedback out into real marketplace, taking into account the fact that you're looking at from your costs as well. You want to try and get back to your return on investment, or get back to break even as quickly as you can on your project, to see whether or not it's going to have some financial success before you move forward to scale. So I think it's a really important stage right now in that initial build, or building out your minimal viable product. It's a crucial part of the process. And like we were just saying, you don't want to spend a stack of money if it's not worth taking that idea out. So it also involves marketing, getting the marketing involved. And I don't think people give enough credit to when you bring your marketing in. So you can be doing a lot of work behind the scenes, like we were talking the other day, Rachel, getting the website up, getting your marketing in place before you even get your MVP out there. And I think the marketing and when you go to launch your MVP need to go hand in hand. So you need to work together with your team to bring that to fruition. And then I think from there, once you've got it at that stage, it's starting to look at your scale and how you're going to scale it forward. And right back when we were talking about people, this is where all your people come into play. So you're looking at your sales and your marketing, and the team that's going to be behind the scenes with your administration, your email campaigns, your marketing, all of those sort of things come into your launch when you go to scale. And then also it's like your future, Hardik was talking about the minimal products or the minimal features that you would have in your MVP. Now it's going, right, the feedback we've got, now how are we going to roll that out to full scale? So some of those things need to be taken into account. Your thoughts, Kristof?
Yeah, look, it's a fantastic point you make there, Darren. And part of that is, right, so if you get to the point where you passed your MVP and you've started to build out and scale, you're going to have multiple teams working on multiple parts of that application, right? And so Hardik has mentioned, you look at, all right, AI. So, right, so you might be able to get a team to help you with that, right? And so part of that means that you've got one part of let's call it the corporation as you are, developing one part of the application, you've got another out, and say it could be remote. And so, one of the blessings we found over the last 24 months is you don't have to all be in the same spot, but what you do need is visibility across that, right? And so we've talked about that platform of the development applications, DevOps, right? And so as part of that DevOps engagement, you have that visibility and communication between the teams that you're working on, regardless of location, and what parts that you're working on together to get that next level, right? And you've got what they call agile steps. So if you're working in an agile methodology, you work in sprints over periods, right? And they could be anywhere from 2 weeks to a month. And by doing that, you can create that life cycle so that you can see where you're at, every team, where they're at and what they're working on, and when they're ready to actually execute on that. And when they do that, they have the visibility to see who's been doing the work, where has it got to, and if there's some, for example, bugs in it, there is a potential to roll that feature back. And, you've hit the nail on the head, Darren. It's all about the people and being able to work together in a cohesive and communicative fashion. And then one of the points that, we can talk about with Rachel in a minute would be about making sure that that message gets delivered across to the end customer. And, how do we get what we're doing to be delivered in a way that goes, hey, user enhancements look like this, so that they're actually excited and involved in it.
I was going to say, actually, Darren, before when you mentioned that, you're preaching to the choir. And that's so often marketing is brought in later. And there's so much that we could have done in preparation to get earlier runs on the board, from building lists, building an audience, creating some excitement, listening, you know, that feedback thing again, getting insights, and it could be really viable information which can make an impact on how we roll out eventually. So yeah, 100% agree. Can't talk about it enough. Now, I also wanted to bring up vendor lock-in.
Good question, Rachel.
Yeah, so I know that this can be a massive challenge. And it's not necessarily a consideration in the start because you're just trying to get everything going and locked in. And unfortunately, you're literally locked in. So tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it's one of those points. So a good vision mixed with your build can give you freedom and revenue, and that can create an impactful project. However, you've hit a nail on the head. When you do get to that point, you can be caught in a locking game. So having that vision and roadmap up front of going, well, I know I don't want to use technology that will potentially lock me in. And we've talked about public cloud providers as an example. If you start and you're embedded in one, you may well find that you get locked in. And by doing that, you can actually see that they're escalating costs along the way. So I give this as an estimate, as an example, pardon me, is that you have done these ROIs and you've done your cost calculations based on what they've given you out of their websites, the public cloud providers. But when reality came to fruition, you're finding that there's 30, 40% extra costs that weren't necessarily calculated at the onset. And these could be like traffic costs, network costs, and other elements, backups, etc., that you weren't considered up front. Working with a provider like us gives you that opportunity to actually look at those future engagements early. But the best part about that is creating in a microservices type of development lifecycle, which the guys have spoken to, right? You will have that flexibility and freedom to be able to port your applications from one provider to another and do so in a seamless fashion without actually interrupting your application platform, etc. So that you do get that. And by doing so, you get visibility across what you want to do plus your costs. But in so doing, you also have that freedom and flexibility to not be locked into any particular roadmap that, say, a public cloud provider has got you on. And so you're drinking the Kool-Aid, but the Kool-Aid's suddenly giving you cavities because it's costing you more. So let's move away to something that's got water in it instead, as an example.
Yeah.
Very nice. So I think what I'm hearing is right tech, right team. It'll put you on the right track so that you can generate revenue faster, so that you can scale and you can make an impact faster. Is that about to sum up what we're getting to? So I'm just going to throw out to the audience now. We're just going to go towards some of our last comments. So if you want to think about any questions that you have and start writing them in the box, and we will reply to them as we can. So Kristof, Darren, Hardik, throwing out to you. Is there anything you want to wrap up with? Any last words of advice?
I'll start there. I'll start there. I think there's so many ideas out there. It's been able to work out an idea that's going to be profitable for you fast. So all the work is done up front. This is what I've learned over the last 15 years in this space. All the work is done up front. Try to get as much of it you can done early, get your community involved as fast as you can, get the feedback from your community as fast as you can, so that you minimize the cost of the project. So a wise mentor said you can do it the easy way or the hard way. The easy way is getting a team who's skilled, knowledgeable, have the work and backup behind the scenes. You can make it and make your cost small up front, or you can do it the hard way and try and do it all yourself. So engaging a team is really important, whoever that team may be. We're just here to give you that guidance where possible. And feel free to reach out to us. I know you'll talk about that at the end, but feel free to reach out. But we're all here to try to add some value to your ideas and see where we can help.
It sounds like a very smart mentor that you had there, Darren. I guess that's, again, it's talking to you build your team around you too, so that you can execute in the best way and support others so that they can bring their product to life in the best way.
Absolutely.
And that's the whole point, right, Darren? So the purpose of entrepreneurs, the startups, they're the ones that have these visions and they have that whole extraordinary light bulb moment that go, we can make an impact. We can do things differently. We can make a change, right? And it's engaging with the teams like ourselves, for example, right? And having that vision turn into something that's actually a reality makes that different. It creates that impact. And we can do that by helping you along the way, and giving you those small nuggets of gold. As you said, having a great mentor is one thing, and having a great team as a mentor in the background helps you do that, so that you can do, may consider a cost up front when you're looking at angel investors. How do I get these sort of costs sort of amortized along the period of the development life cycle, for example? They're all relevant, but that means that along the way, once you actually get that investment from a seed investor, or, you've talked about it, even in an internal application, you will have that ROI, and that's where you get that. I mean, for us, it's about assisting you on that, and making that change and making that real, sort of impact out there. And I say that because that's what we're all trying to do, something, right? Make an impact of some sort out there.
I always talk about game day, and game day is that impact. It's when things start rolling and you start feeling what the product is or what the application was, you can start to see it making an impact with your audience. And that feeling, even from a support person on the sideline, is just unreal. Like, it's that magical piece. And I think that's as well, it's part of what entrepreneurs chase, is because it's purpose, right? And Darren, we've talked about this. Purpose is key. And you've talked about how vision and strategy, it builds purpose.
Yes, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, when we start our idea, we want to know if we're going to make money on it, whether we're going to have impact in our community. And ultimately that leads to some financial return, which leads to freedom, which allows us to impact more people. So exactly.
Couldn't have said it better.
Yeah.
Couldn't have said it better. So should I answer the question that we've got here?
Yeah, excellent.
Rachel, so we've had a question. Does the technology used impact the marketability of the product? That one goes straight to you there, Rachel.
So it does. I didn't actually consider that coming to me. Does the technology used impact? I guess it depends which technology you're talking about, but the answer is always going to be yes. Anything you use is going to impact the marketability of the product. But what's really key when it comes to what's behind the product isn't necessarily the technology. It's how you communicate it and how you share it and how you tell people what the impact it's going to have for them will be, because people connect with the why behind the product, not necessarily the what, which is the technology which executes it. So if we can talk to that why and that purpose and that vision and that mission that makes us all so excited, then we're going to be able to sell a product no matter what technology is backing it.
I'd actually go even one step further, Rachel, from our perspective, right? So from a technology perspective, I'm sure everybody on the call has heard of Uber. Would you know? Yeah, just once. But would you know what platform it's developed on? What technology?
I've got no idea.
Most people wouldn't.
Correct. And the fact that they actually changed that technology 5 years into operation because they ran into scaling problems. But to that point, the technology may not be important to the end user. It will only be important to those who are actually inside of the organization and how they do that, and how you needed to then, which with Uber, for example, they needed to grow and scale, and their original technology architecture and their framework wasn't allowing that. So great question. Really appreciate that one.
And efficiency internally too, right, Kristof? Like, while it might not necessarily have an impact to our end audience, it may not, because you'll obviously have feedback if your technology is crap. But otherwise, it's just it's the means to what you're trying to get out and trying to achieve.
Yeah, look, absolutely.
I just want to add something to that and try and put it in a visual perspective.
Awesome.
Like when you're starting out with your MVP, you basically might be building it on a mini miner base, because you want to get your concept out there and see if it's okay. And like what happened in Uber, now all of a sudden you got to build it on a Hummer base, which is so you can't build it on top of the mini miner. So you got to completely scale it and change the whole infrastructure to suit. So just to put some sort of visual perspective to it.
Yeah, I love that one, Darren. Thank you. I can just see that, right?
Yeah.
It's like the mouse and the elephant's feet,
yeah.
Right? That's where you got to start, but then you've got to eventually get to be like the lion to be able to eat the elephant, so to speak, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, you've heard it from Kristof, Darren, and Hardik today. You need to have a team together to get the best results. That's really what it comes down to. This group is fantastic and open and transparent. Please feel free to reach out to any of them. In the next few days, you will get a recap blog, which will talk you through some of the key points of what we've discussed today. And we'll also send you out links to everybody's LinkedIn so that you can connect with them and be in touch. In the meantime, if you do want to get in touch earlier, feel free to find our details on the Zoom link that you would have been sent, and we will direct it to the right person. So we thank you for attending. Thank you, attendees. You've been wonderful. A lot of great and insightful conversation, which people can really put to use. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
Thank